race, religion, or political view, that place must, at that moment, become the center of the universe. Let us bow our heads in gratitude for the companionship of our colleagues in Rotary, for the strength we draw from that companionship and shared purpose. Let us promise to do all the good we can in all the ways we can, and to never, ever be indifferent. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. All right. Hold on a minute. My connection has already quit twice on me, but I'm on my phone, so I'll be able to keep running the meeting and hearing things. You just may see some static picture of me at some point. It's going to be an interesting afternoon, I can tell. So I'll quickly run through the announcements. First of all, I'd like to recognize our Rotary Yours recorder, which is Eric Harvey today. Thank you, Eric. And I sent an email out to everybody about the good news that Africa has been declared wild polio virus free. This is huge, huge. So that was announced by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And Rotary International President Holger Knack said, during a challenging year for global health, the certification of the African region as wild polio virus free is a sign of hope and progress that shows what can be accomplished through collaboration and perseverance. So most of you know Rotary International gives a lot of money to that cause, and there's a 4-time match from the Gates Foundation. It's huge. So it takes a lot of money, but it took a lot of people, a lot of volunteers to do that. Cases still exist in Afghanistan and Pakistan, but at least it's not in Africa anymore. Vince, you wanted to announce something?
Well, there was supposed to be a change of command, as you all know, on highway cleanup. However, we have not found a new commander yet. So therefore, you only thought you're off the hook. We are going to have a highway cleanup on October 3rd. That's Saturday morning, October 3rd at 8:30 sharp at the Park and Ride. And if you happen to be running for elected office, this is an outstanding opportunity for a photo op picking up trash along the highway. Yeah. But I want to encourage our team and all who want to participate. It is a fun event. It will be October 3rd, and it will be at 8:30, and it will be at the Park and Ride. And we'll announce the different deployments and detachment people and logistics involved. So I still am looking for a new commander of the highway cleanup crowd, but I will ensure we clean up that highway on October 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. Any other committee chair announcements?
Just to remind people, Literacy Committee meeting this Thursday. That would be September 3rd at noon. See you there.
Okay, you're doing great work. Anyone else? All right, not hearing any. Sherry, can you take this moment just to remind us of the mixer that's coming up?
Oh, sure. Hold on, I want to make sure I get the right date. We're going to do a mixer on, helps if I look at the right month. Sorry about that. I should have been prepared. Thursday, September 24th, we're going to do it at 7 p.m. It'll be a Zoom mixer. So if you want to bring your cocktail or your soda or your cheese and crackers or the rest of your dinner and hang out with us, that would be great. I will send out a Zoom link a little bit closer to the event so it doesn't get lost, and then I'll remind everybody as well. But maybe I will send out some sort of an email to get an RSVP to see how many we can expect. I'm hoping that maybe we could do some trivia or something, have a little bit of fun, a little bit of a visit. And I think Joni explained last week that you can come to the meeting that week. You can come to the mixer, you can come to both and get a makeup. So ever how you want to do it, we would love to have you there. Just a way to get together socially.
Thank you, Sherry. Also along those lines for the makeups, Lisa announced last week that, you know, if you go to a committee meeting, that is a makeup for a meeting, but she has to know about it. So you need to email her about it. or if you have a recorder at your committee meeting, they can send the list of names to Lisa. And you can also make up a meeting by going to the Jamestown, New York Rotary.org site and watching one of these meetings because they're all up on the website. Thank you, Chris Anderson, for doing that. I will be sending an email out to all the committee chairs this week. I'd like to get together with all of you sometime over the next 2 weeks, whether it's virtual or, heaven forbid, in person. But I'd like to just check up with you on how things are going and also give you maybe some guidance. The board and I have discussed how we can help you to help the board, help the club continue to be as great as it has always been. 2 weeks ago, District Governor Frank Adamson visited us and told us about his Puddle for Polio Plus fundraiser, which is October 24th. And we still need to find a couple riders, cyclists, who could go 70 miles. I don't know if we can do it over a couple days. I don't know if we could do it, how we could do it. But anyway, we would like to find a couple riders, and no one's come forward from the club to say they would do that. But if you know somebody, please let me know this week. If you don't, I'm going to reach out to the Holly Loft and see if they have a couple people who would do it. And then our commitment is to donate $50 each to this. And then ask a friend if they would give 25. If that happens, we can meet our goal. So unless somebody has, great objections to this, I'm going to carry forward with it. So
hey, Joni, this is Randy.
Yeah.
I don't think Tori's on today, but Jake Schrotz, the fiscal officer at the Community Foundation, is an avid biker. And
Okay.
He's got a friend, John Celo, who the two of them ride a lot. That might be a possibility. And otherwise, I'd be glad to contact Tom Schmidt. If you remember Tom Schmidt, he was a retired supervisor.
Yeah.
He was actually a superintendent, I should say, and he was at the Jackson Center for a while. He's also a very avid biker. But those are some people that I know are in the business, and they might work out well.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Joni?
Yes. Yes.
Count
Sue.
Greg out.
But can you write a check for $50?
I think he probably can.
All right. So I just want you to know that's coming up. Any other announcements from anyone? All right. Remember to pay your dues. $160 by check, $166 online, and something else. Never mind. Let's just go on to Happy Buck. Who's got a Happy Buck?
I will if nobody else does. I'll get it started anyways. My Happy Buck is for Vince. Thank you so much, Colonel, for doing the highway cleanup. I had a great time with you, and I'm glad to see you continue. I hope somebody will step up and follow in his large footsteps, but thanks a lot.
And thank you for the donation to get 5 don't have to lean over pickup things, grabbers. So you will have for the first 5.
Oh,
we'll have
nice.
those, I'll call them lazy people pickup things.
Well, I'm a lazy person, so I'll use one of those. Thank you so much.
I'd like to withdraw my
Grabber.
comment about lazy. Okay.
Grabbers.
No, that's
Grabbers.
fine.
Other Happy Bucks? Come on, something good's gonna have happened.
I'll pay $1 for Greg's grabber.
Okay.
I'll put in $1 for my husband's unnecessary gigantic lawnmower. It's pretty sad when you have to cut a hole in the fence just to get it in the yard. So, so we'll go with it.
Yeah, I'll pay $1. Where are you?
Where are you, Dave?
I got my roses back. They were just about. They've been neglected until mid-July when I got home, and it's been about a month and a half of sprays and mulching and
Baby-
fertilizers and clippings. So I'm real happy to have that.
Aw, babysitting the roses. Very good.
Yeah.
Anything else from the group?
I'm happy that the tree came down without exploding all over, and it was massive and it almost hit the house, but the logger knew exactly what he was doing and laid it down with a big, huge thud that woke up my neighbor. So I'm happy about that. It's over.
Good.
Joni, it's Randy.
Yeah.
I like to put in a buck for the Jamestown tarp skunks that recently announced that they hired a new, I'm going to call it a general manager. It's actually a director of business operations, Jacob Kinberg, young man from the area. And we're real excited about that. At some point in time, I would, suggest that the program committee will see if we can get them together and possibly have him be a speaker when the time is right, a little closer to the season, next spring.
Yeah. Yeah, he looks very qualified. I forgot to announce our visitors and guests. I scooted right over that. So I see we have Charles McKenzie, our speaker, Tracy Mitrano, Michelle Starwalt, our assistant district governor, and Paulette Klein, soon to be a full member. Anyone else? Have I missed? All right, not seeing any activity. All right, we'll go on to our presentation.
Yes.
Please welcome Chris Anderson. Oh, I ask you all to mute, please.
Okay.
Somebody's still talking. I ask you to, welcome Chris Anderson, who will introduce our speaker. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Joni. Can everybody hear me okay? So I'm pleased to be able to introduce Tracy Mitrano. She's a candidate for the 23rd Congressional District seat, currently being held by Tom Reed. Tracy was born and raised in Rochester to an Italian and Irish family, and has spent her whole life in Western and Southern Tier, New York. She learned early the meaning of a hard day's work in her father's restaurant in downtown Rochester. Tracy went on to become the first member of her family to go to college because her parents believed that getting an education would give her choices in life that they did not have. In large part because of their sacrifice, Tracy went on to receive a PhD in American history from Binghamton University and a law degree from Cornell. In her community, Tracy sat on the town planning board for almost 10 years and was a trustee of the Tompkins County Public Library. In addition, Tracy served as assigned counsel attorney for many years in New York, earning reduced wages to represent people who did not have the funds to represent themselves in custody, abuse, and neglect cases. In her career, Tracy taught American history, family and social policy, and internet law, and practiced corporate and family law before becoming the director of information technology policy at Cornell University. In 2014, Tracy opened an information management, security, and private consulting business, and in 2016, created a cybersecurity certificate program for the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. Tracy's experience in cybersecurity policy gives her a unique understanding of the threats that face our nation today, and the ways in which our federal government has a role in protecting our privacy and keeping us safe. Tracy was moved to step up and enter politics after watching our government's inability to adequately address, stop, or even comprehend the foreign interference in our 2016 elections, as well as the near daily attacks on our digital infrastructure in the form of ransomware and more. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today, Tracy. The meeting is all yours.
Well, thank you very much. And it's wonderful to be here with all of you, some of whom I know and have met, and others who are new friends. I want to be sure that I'm going to go down the right path because I often speak in my professional capacity that was just mentioned. And then, yes, it is true, I am running for Congress, and the district, of course, includes the area in which you all live. What do you think I'm talking about today might be the way that I can just be sure that I'm not going to step on the wrong path. Can anyone just give me a little, do you think I'm talking about cybersecurity, which I have spoken about frequently at Rotary clubs, Or do you think I'm speaking as a candidate? I just want to be sure I'm going to go down.
Tracy, I think you're going to be speaking as a candidate because we have throughout the next couple of weeks we'll have Tom Reed in at the end of October, I believe. So yeah, please speak as a candidate and also share your cybersecurity as well.
Very good. Okay. I just wanted to be sure. Thank you.
Yep, you bet.
Yes, the introduction does say very well. I was making more than Congress pays, but I have become so concerned about the deterioration of concepts that at least I grew up with. My father and all his brothers, my mother and her brothers, all were in the Second World War. My cousins have been in the subsequent ones, Vietnam, foot soldiers, you know, very strong attachment to our military and our law enforcement, and very basic Memorial Day, 4th of July kind of concepts of what it means to be a citizen. I grew up with those concepts. I went to Catholic schools in Rochester until I went to college, went to the University of Rochester and then Binghamton and Cornell. And even when I've taught cybersecurity, I connected to citizenship and democracy. So my concern is maybe keeping right in line of what I grew up with as the values of someone who came from modest economic backgrounds, have had opportunities my parents did not have. I'm not a wealthy person, but in about 2016 and 2017, my children fledged the nest. I was working, I was, you know, carrying on with my life, but it seemed to me it was time for anyone who wants to be sure this country goes down the right path, that I do what many of us have done now, jump into politics or become more involved in it. And that is when I entered the congressional race. People say, why didn't I go for something local or state? It happens that the work I've done all my professional life is on federal issues, whether it be about healthcare, education policy, infrastructure insofar as it touches with broadband deployment, and those kinds of issues, internet policy and law. So it was very natural that the area that I believe I can be most effective in for the people in this district can be met at the federal and not the state or even a local level. I also want to let you all know that next door, someone has rented the house out for the week, and they brought a phalanx of motorcycles, and now they have just launched a phalanx of, what do you call those things? You know, when you drive around like a motorcycle on a lake. I know there's a name for it, I just can't think of it right now. And they're all out there. So if you hear, it's not that I'm, you know, Sunday at Niagara. I'm just sitting here, but the people around me are revving up the engines. So I didn't want you to think it was intentional background noise that I was bringing to your event today. The issues I feel strongly about for our district are the same issues that I came forward with in 2018. And now as a result of COVID and the economic collapse that we have, they're the same issues, but they're now in more bold relief. We need healthcare reform in the direction of affordable, available, and efficient. This is where the United States really has a lot to do. We are the least efficient and we pay the most in healthcare, whether it be the government, whether it be you and me, whether it be as taxpayers, out of pocket. We may pay more in healthcare by double than the next highest country, and that is Switzerland. So affordable, available, and efficient, I believe, are the goals for which we should all be working, Democrats and Republicans, to get that in place for this country. We have been in crisis on that issue for far too long now. It's time to just go in with some common sense reform. Basic drugs like insulin and EpiPen and inhalers, they should not be allowed to be exorbitant costs. Pre-existing conditions should be accepted. There should be no prohibition against anyone with a pre-existing. We all have, eventually in life, you get some form of a pre-existing condition that's just inappropriate to use that to discriminate against people getting on healthcare plans. So I could go into more detail, but the goals, and I think these are goals that we share no matter what party: affordable, available, and efficient. I'm a huge proponent of education, having dedicated my life to higher education. We need some form of pre-K, the earliest we can get children into socialized experiences, 3 years of age. They have better outcomes. All the research shows that. So if it's early Head Start, pre-K, whatever it is, we need to be sure that we're helping our children get a good footing in life right away. We need to figure out why we have such inequalities in our public education. I mean, obviously, yes, where you live and how much the taxes are and so forth plays into it. But, you know, the state contributes about 60% of any school district. And we need to be sure that's being done fairly. Does seem as if there's a little more going downstate than there needs to be coming out this way. I have talked to many people who are running for our state legislature. For some reason, this has not been addressed by incumbents, and it really needs to be addressed by those of us who live west of the Hudson. And the further west you go, I think the more they kind of forget that we exist out here. So we need attention to that. But at the federal level, the most important thing I believe we need to do is reset the interest rates on educational loans. It's wrong and inappropriate to be allowing even our government loans to be getting up to 8–10%, and then private loans 12–14%. Boy, there's no better way to discriminate against education than to indenture people to debt for 20–30 years after they leave college. They can't get a mortgage, buy a good car, start a family, participate in the consumer economy when they're just paying money back to the government and to private banking in those usurious amounts. Administrative rates for government loans, 2.5%, 4% for a private loan. That's appropriate. And that's how we continue to incentivize people to use education. It is the #1 vehicle for upward mobility. We shouldn't be pulling back on it. We should be pushing it forward. Infrastructure has always been a very important area of interest for me, not only, again, growing up and living in this part of the state, but also because of my interest in internet policy. If people were not aware of the paucity of internet connections in the 23rd district before COVID, I bet I don't need to persuade you now. And in a recent debate structure that Mr. Reed sent a representative to, and I spoke at for NYSIT, that's the teachers union, they were, you know, really exercised about this because they've got students who have fallen off the map. And they gave them a computer, they gave them a hotspot. There's still no internet for them to connect to, whether it's a data tower, whether it's a wired connection cable. And we need to address this area. It was very interesting because when it came up, Mr. Reed's representative said, that's Tracy's issue. And I thought, well, I definitely will take it, but honey, it's everyone's issue. We have to address, it's how our farmers have been failing. It's how we exacerbate the differences in public schools between, say, an Ithaca and a Corning, or Cattaraugus or Allegheny, parts of Chautauqua. We have to get the internet out to everyone. Just a fast dip into history. Franklin Delano Roosevelt did rural electrification, yes, because it was a good New Deal program. It was because he knew we were going to get in a war. We're not efficient as an economy, some of which is working without electricity and others that was. We needed to have an efficient economy to support industry, to support military development and action. It's the same thing now. We cannot be competitive globally if we cannot get some uniform utility out to the people who need, want, and use it. Environment, you know, I sign on to the Biden environmental plan. We need to have not something that's going to shut everything down today, but we need to have a schedule that is going to help us move on to renewables, which, by the way, could be a great 21st century industry for industrial development in this part of the country, but also it's good for the country. We have to get on that schedule and start moving that out. And as I say, that works, it's a double win. This is a kind of industry we can have in the Southern tier, and it's also something we need to be moving towards as a country and maybe, of course, even as a planet. all of those things together are what make for the foundation of economic development. And, you know, I was talking about this before when the market was good, but the economy wasn't, not for people all over this district. Most people are having a hard time making ends meet. Costs for healthcare, costs for internet, costs for education, up. People can only absorb on wages that have not shot up that quickly in 20, 30 years, so much. And why are they having such a hard time making ends meet? We haven't addressed these issues. It's time just to be serious, sensible, centrist about our addressing them so that we can incentivize this whole area to be a place where people want to invest. You are simply not going to get people to invest in Allegheny or Cattaraugus or parts of Chautauqua if there's no internet there. I worked in this area of technology, and I used to say to people, hey, this was before the fires in California too. I used to say, hey, we're the Napa of the East. You should come out here. It's gorgeous. The Finger Lakes, Chautauqua Lake, Lake Erie, beautiful water systems, Allegheny River, Genesee River, so on and so forth. And I swear to God, we would talk, they'd start to get a little excited. What do you do about January, February, March? Take a vacation, come back. Land is inexpensive. You'll just take off here. It'll be great. Do you have the internet? Oh. So these are basic things that we have to do in order to get this place moving again. And as I say, it was true before COVID. It's really true now. And now is a time that we can do it as more of a joint effort instead of it seeming like it's one party or the other, or one faction or the other, poor versus wealthy, something like that. My growing up in Western New York and being part of this culture all my life, people are tired of that. They just want to move forward, and they just want to move forward together. Why don't I leave it at that so that there are plenty of time for questions. Thank you.
Any questions?
Don't be shy.
Gotta unmute yourself, Greg. There you go.
Well, thank you for speaking to us, and it was all very interesting. Today's Democratic Party is like a different one than I grew up with because I'm very, 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 very old. And where would you stand on that continuum? Because now it's fairly off to the left, and I'm not very comfortable with that. I'm not a right winger either, but I guess I'm somewhere in the middle. So where does that put Tracy?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked it, and I can answer it squarely. I think of myself as pretty centrist. There are excesses within the Democratic Party that are not my cup of tea, for sure. And I can tell you that my parents, who were Republican, my father more of a sense, what should I say, like a business-oriented Republican. He had a small restaurant, as was mentioned. And my mother was a rabid Republican. I mean, she would have thrown herself in front of railroad tracks for Nixon.
So you were like a sinner.
And I can't tell you how many people I talk to who are Republicans who say this isn't my Republican Party. I think it's incumbent upon people of good sense, common decency, integrity, patriotism, love of their country, love of their community, love of their schools, their friends, all the wonderful things that we have right here. We've got the potential for everything right here in this district, in this area, to just say, we're tired of that. Let's just be sensible and work together and go forward. I mean, I'll be happy to be specific on any issue, Greg, if you want to drill down, but as an overall matter, that's where I place myself.
Anyone else?
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy.
Because then I'll start talking again, then you'll really be sorry.
I have a question. Two things, actually, Tracy. Being a Catholic school alumni, would you ever consider supporting a small level, not a huge level, of a voucher system for children and families, parents who send their children to Catholic schools? We only have one left in Chautauqua County right now. And then my second question is, would you ever take a really solid stand? I know Senator Barella has a little bit right now, but allowing families to visit their loved ones in nursing homes. Some people, it's been over 5 months since they had anyone visit them, which seems, my dad's home with hospice, so I don't need to worry about it, but I feel so bad for relatives who haven't seen their loved ones in 5 months.
Yeah, those are really good questions. On the voucher system, yes, I too, went to Catholic schools. Maybe things have changed, but I was comfortable and my parents were comfortable paying tuition for me to go there and still paying their taxes. And right now, I think that's where we are. I know the economies have changed. I don't know whether there are some opportunities, especially as the Catholic Church has gone through, gosh, so much, in 50 years, let's say, to recreate some of this will maybe be a little legalistic, the corporate nature around which how they fund their own enterprises. My doctoral dissertation was on Catholic women's higher education in New York State. And it was very interesting how it began with either the diocesan orders or the independent orders. There were 13 of them in all of New York State, Duville up in Buffalo, Nazareth and Rochester, and then, the big names like Manhattanville and New Rochelle and all of those schools down in the city. But what happened around the time when they began to go down because there was more Catholic integration in the society and assimilation and upward mobility, a lot of reasons. I won't bore you, but my point was going to be this. They disestablished as owned by the orders, and then they became organizations that the more they integrated into larger ventures, for example, Duville or Nazareth have done very well. It's because they already made some shifts that they needed to make. That would be the advice that I would give those institutions, rather than relying on a voucher or something like that. I think there are ways that they can go. And then, they attract great faculty, wonderful leaders, and good students, many of whom come from a Catholic tradition. And I think that would, if I were the leader, that's the direction I would be taking it. On the second question, I speak from experience. My brother is developmentally disabled. He is 4 years older than me and was institutionalized in 1958. That's before Medicaid. That was before the reforms in the area of profound developmental disabilities. The place where he used to be when I visited him as a child was a nightmare. Things got a lot better after Medicaid and many of those reforms. He's in a group home now, but I haven't seen him since March, maybe February, because I didn't get there in March. And so it's been a long time. He got COVID. He got COVID from staff members before they were being tested and needed to be tested. And so I've been very, very much in favor of testing. And I do not know how, Michelle, he survived it, because the reason he's disabled was he was born very prematurely in the 50s before they had a lot of good medical science for neonatal care. And he developed double pneumonia and died. And then he was revived, but he lost a lot of oxygen in the meantime. And so I thought the lungs being the main focus of this disease, I mean, literally when Thompson Hospital, it's an out thing down in the Canandaigua area where he lives, from the University of Rochester, called me. I started to cry, and usually I don't do that, but it was just so shocked. He survived it. And so did the other residents. But I would love to see him. And I could imagine, again, if I were the leader, I could imagine how you would do some kind of visitation where you square off an area and there are protocols. What I think is in the way is the bandwidth the staff has to do that. They're just trying to keep up, and they may not have the protocols, but maybe the state could and should, because he is under state care in that sense, put some money in there along with our hospitals, research, our schools opening up now, people who needed to stay, so they're not being forced out of their homes, people who need it because they're not working in jobs, and it's not because they just want to be incentivized to stay home. They don't have any opportunities right now. We need more research to find out where, when, and how we can help the people who need it, and where, when, and how these stimulus programs are going over the board. we don't have enough information. And so I'm in favor of that. And with that, some of the things that I think we could do if we had more information so we could target where we put our tax dollars would be to create opportunities so we can go visit our parents or our siblings or, you know, anyone in those kinds of residential care units. That's a very thoughtful question you asked me. Thank you.
Any other questions? Wait a minute. Sue, you're muted.
A very broad question. The safety of the social media, primarily Instagram.
There's a wonderful, well, if you're talking about the back end of it, I'm sure you know Instagram is owned by Facebook, and Facebook does not have a very good record. And Facebook is being led by someone who, you know, is remarkably intelligent and ambitious, but he also, I think, would sell his soul if he had to in order to, you know, make Facebook dominant. So I do think we need more, some forms of better regulation about the security and privacy of our social networking sites, such as Facebook, such as Google, such as Instagram, that can only be done with very thoughtful, in other words, not such sweepingly broad regulation that we're going to hamper innovation, but we most assuredly could balance innovation with safety. And that has not been attended to properly by this government or the government before it. One of the reasons we had problems with Russian interference, for example, is in 2011, the Federal Election Commission got in touch with Facebook and said, why aren't you reporting political advertisements? So, you know, if I go on the Buffalo TV station, I have to report the money that I'm paying the station to put me on, and the station has to report that I've paid them money to go on for a political commercial. So they said to Facebook, why aren't you doing what everyone else does? The New York Times, the Buffalo News, everyone does. Oh my God, you're gonna suppress innovation. We're too busy. What an administrative burden that would be. You can't expect us to do that. Well, so the FEC kind of went, oh, well, okay, we don't want to suppress innovation. And then we've got all of these Russian interferences, you know, paying in clearly identifiable follow the money tracks as to where it's coming from. So, you know what, this isn't one administration over the other. We need people in Congress who know something about internet law and policy, cybersecurity, and the international array of what this whole cyber world is about, and doing good legislation that will target the issue, will not hamper innovation, and will protect both citizenship rights and our consumer rights. And if you didn't notice, I feel strongly about that. So, we don't have enough people in Congress who understand. That's the #1 problem. Have you ever seen the looks on most of our legislators' faces when they have Zuckerberg or someone like there to interview? I mean, they look like deer in the headlights. And we really need to have, I've got to decline that. There we go.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, we really have to have people in there who understand it so we can have the good discussions about how do we get it pinpointed to do the right thing and not be overbroad and put a hamper on innovation. But we can do it. We just need to be thinking along those lines and do it. There's a book out, by the way, I want to recommend to all of you. It's called True or False. It was written by someone who acted as my communications director for a very brief period of time. She's a former CIA analyst, and it's very good about critical thinking on the use of the internet. It is targeted to young adults. I read it. Everyone should take a look at this book. I learned things, a lot of things, and I used to teach this. So this is a book I would recommend. If you have grandchildren, especially young adults, high school, going into college, they should read this book. It's so accessible, and honestly, it will help them understand the internet and their use of it much better than probably they would have before they read it, because few people have really grasped all of the angles. There are economic angles, there are legal angles, there are technical angles, and there are social norm angles. And this author, Cindy Otis, does a good job of working with all of those issues instead of just doing technology or just doing the law. So True or False is the name. Cindy Otis is the author. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg.
I have two more questions and then I'd be quiet. So the first one is, I'm a big fan of term limits throughout all levels of government. And sometimes you're going to throw out somebody you really love, but that's the name of the game. Because if long-term people in office was a good thing, we'd be in much better shape today. So what is your position on term limits for your particular case running for Congress? I would only give you 5 terms. That's it, you're gone. The second question is, I'm not quite so sure that renewable energy is going to be the answer. It gives us 4% about of what we get now. So the one most greenest form of energy that's capable for us to use is nuclear. I know it gets a bad name, but it really shouldn't. So that's my 2 questions. Your position on nuclear, plants can last for up to 80 years, a nuclear plant, and the second one is in term limits. Thank you, and then I'm done.
I'm happy for your questions. I'm not against nuclear. I do think that for a variety of reasons, we shied away from it. It's one of the reasons why we have the problem of West Valley. As to why that did not become a going concern is because the United States turned away from nuclear. And so the idea of reprocessing materials became, an unproductive economic path. We weren't investing in it. France, for example, has invested in nuclear, and I think they've done very well. Obviously, you have to be careful. Chernobyl is still a problem. I mean, you cannot be running this when you have an unstable government. You cannot be running it when you have unstable civil society. So right now, those are factors that one needs to take into account if you're going to have a policy of using nuclear. We only have 4% now of renewable. There's a lot of growth area there. I'm not saying it's utopia and so forth, but to use contemporary numbers doesn't do justice of what we need to do to be incentivizing the research and incentivizing the economic development of renewables. But I'm not saying they're a panacea. We obviously can and should be doing more. We cannot continue with the reliance on fossil fuels the way that we have. I am not saying we close them out completely tomorrow, but obviously something's going on and we need to pay attention to it. It's also a geopolitical issue apart from being a climate issue. But wait, you had one other question. It was the one
term limits.
Oh, term limits, yes. Off the top of the bat, so to speak, I'm not for term limits. And by the way, I should be because the incumbent's been there too long, but I would rather have robust campaign finance reform. And I think that will take care of the issue people have about term limits. On the other hand, if we cannot get robust campaign finance reform, as a second resort, I certainly could see voting for it. Because it is time to get people who have become so invested and they have become politically corrupt with all the money that they get from big corporations. They don't need to take their feet off the desk. The $100,000 come in, at one swipe at a time. Banking industry, here, have $100,000 so you be sure you never talk about reducing the interest rates on student loans in Congress. Pharmaceutical industry, here, have $150,000. And instead of addressing the addiction problem that we have, why don't you just say death penalty to drug pushers? This is what we have with incumbents who are paid to stay in office in order to vote not in the interests of the people who live and they represent, but in the interests of those big corporations that can write those checks. Meanwhile, someone like myself spends hours and hours and hours and hours and hours calling for every dollar and every penny. The most an individual can give me, if you got inspired, Greg, is $2,800. Meanwhile, someone who sits there is the beneficiary of corporate PACs, not to mention names such as our current representative in Congress, can just sit back and hundreds of thousands of dollars come in the door and you're not even really clear where it's coming from because of the failure of campaign finance reform to follow the money. This is wrong for America. If, by the way, moving on, I am elected, I only want to serve 3 terms. 5 terms would really be a stretch. I'm 62 years old. I'm coming at this out of passion. I'm not doing it knowing that I'm going to lose and then hoping to write the wills of the executives at Corning. I am doing this because we are off the rails, and I'm just a reasonable, down the road person who's always lived here and always cared. I care about my children. I care about my family. I care about my community. I care about my church. I care about this place. It's so beautiful. And I just want to get in there and try to get things back on a better track. And then believe me, I will be happy to come home to the Finger Lakes and Western New York and just enjoy myself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Tracy,
you.
I have a question. Since Greg brought up the issue of renewable energy versus nuclear energy, have you considered or looked into thorium nuclear energy? Because thorium reactors cannot melt down. It's impossible. There could never be a Chernobyl or anything else. And the waste products have virtually no half-life to get rid of compared to uranium. And the technology has already been proven to work. And it would be a lot less expensive. Are you aware of that whole picture?
No, but I do know thorium is further down in the periodic table, so I can understand automatically what you're saying about the half-life and so forth. That's a great idea. I will look into it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a major movement beginning to take place in a number of countries, and whoever develops it first will be the world leader in energy.
Yeah,
I'll just throw my hat in the ring for that one.
right. And by the way, I don't ever think of, most things I don't think of as versus, you know, this versus that. I think that gets us into terrible mindsets. We need all of that moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Any other questions?
Please ask, because otherwise I've got to get back on the phone and start calling people for money, which is my least favorite thing to do. I would rather be here talking with you guys.
Well, not seeing anything or hearing anything. Thank you, Tracy. This is very interesting. A donation to Rotary International's End Polio Now Fund will be made in your honor to inoculate a number of children. And we're this close to eradicating it throughout the world, as I said earlier. I wanted to let everybody know, remind you that the theme for this year in Rotary is Rotary Opens Opportunities. So think about what opportunities you'll see, what opportunities can we take advantage of in our community to help our community be better? How can we do that? Think about that over the next 2 weeks, because we're not meeting next week. It's Labor Day. So enjoy the holiday. Remember and honor the achievements of American workers. This has been a national holiday since 1894. So think about that. And we'll see you on September 14th when our speaker will be Chautauqua County District Attorney Patrick Swanson. Thank you.
I'm innocent.
Have a great... What?
I'm innocent.
I'm sure you are, Greg. I'm sure. Thank you, everybody. Have a great 2 weeks.
Thank
You too.